Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 293, The Truth About the Great Tribulation, Part 3. It will be according to your faith. The podcast objectives are analyze the times of the Gentiles, reveal the two choices you have in guarding the truth, analyze the role of faith in our reality, and reveal the blasphemy of those who doubt Elohim. This lesson contains timelines and other visuals. Therefore, if you are listening to the podcast, I advise you to watch the video version on our website or YouTube, or request a PDF of the lesson so you can add the visual effect. The times of the Gentiles. Now, we concluded the most recent podcast analyzing the purpose of these last days. In doing so, we hardened a crucial reality concerning the Great Tribulation, which I will offer as an inflection point. There is no purpose for a 7-year period of Great Tribulation in these last days for the renewed nation of Israel. In addition to this conclusion of purpose, we also came to see the remaining 6 guidelines of the Great Tribulation. At this time, I would like to contrast these guidelines against the guidelines for the Great Distress as my last piece of formal evidence proving these are 2 different prophetic events. Now, as you can see by the table, we have the guideline in the far left column, the Great Tribulation in the middle column, and the Great Distress in the far right column. And we'll go line by line. The first guideline is purpose. The purpose of the Great Tribulation is to destroy the former nation of Israel. On the other hand, the purpose of the Great Distress is to prove the renewed nation of Israel. Next, we have the times. The times of the Great Tribulation is the destruction of Jerusalem. And on the other hand, the time of the Great Distress is the second coming of Yahushua Messiah. Next, we have the season. The season of the Great Tribulation is the 7-year Yehudi-Roman War. And the season of the Great Distress are the sifting of the nations, the destruction of Mystery Babel, and the day of Yahuwah. Next, we have the messenger. The messengers of the Great Tribulation were Yahushua Messiah and Daniel. And the messengers of the Great Distress were the prophets and all the disciples of Yahushua Messiah. Next, we have the sequence. The sequence of the Great Tribulation are all the events in Daniel's 70th week. And the sequence of the Great Distress are the 7 signs, beginning with the call to walk in the way of holiness to the second great Exodus. Next, we have the people. The people of the Great Tribulation are the former nation of Israel. And the people of the Great Distress are the renewed nation of Israel. And last but not least, we have the place. The place of the Great Tribulation was Jerusalem. And the place of the Great Distress are all the safe spaces where Elohim leads us during the second great Exodus. Now, seeing as Yahuwah does not operate outside of the spiritual model of purpose, we harden our conclusion from the first podcast in this mini series. Vis-a-vis, not only has the Great Tribulation period already occurred, but there will be no period of Great Tribulation upon the renewed nation of Israel in these last days. Here again, there is no purpose. Along these lines, the Great Tribulation occurred in the first instance of the last days, as you can see by the timeline below. As we revealed aforetime, the Great Tribulation is the equivalence of the 70th week in Daniel's prophecy. See Daniel 9:24 through 27. You can see this clearly by the timeline below. By 73 CE, every event associated with Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy had transpired. Since then, we have witnessed the times of the Gentiles, which Yahushua prophesied would follow the 70 prophetic weeks decreed upon the former nation. Luke 21:20 through 24 reads, "And when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its laying waste is near. Then let those in Yehuda flee to the mountains, and let those who are in the midst of her go out, and let not those who are in the fields enter thereinto. Because these are days of vengeance, to fill all that have been written. For there shall be great distress in the earth, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled." This passage clearly confirms the timeline below. The destruction of Jerusalem marks the beginning of the times of the Gentiles. Ergo, it must also mark the end of Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy. And this time will not end until Yahushua returns and destroys a coalition of Gentile nations at the Battle of Armageddon. You have two choices. Now, there are additional takeaways from the passage in Luke that harden the truth we have presented in this mini-series. Explicitly, Luke reveals that there would be great wrath upon the nation of Israel. Now, the question of the hour is, who is Yahushua talking about? To wit, is he talking about the former nation of Israel or the renewed nation of Israel? The answer is sure. He is obviously talking about the former nation. Besides the obvious fact that tens of prophecies verify this conclusion, you should also consider how more than 100 prophecies confirm the amazing love and compassion Elohim is displaying in these last days, explicitly in the seasons of restoration and sealing. Here again, these scriptures and their authentic interpretations are all fundamental to establishing the purpose of Elohim. And purpose is the foundation of every word of prophecy. It supports every other guideline. This is precisely why I haven't wasted any of my time or yours debating isolated scriptures or traditions that have no basis in truth. Rather, I have constrained myself to operating within the spiritual guidelines of truth. In doing so, we have a baseline of truth by which we can align our collective understanding of the scriptures. Trust me, this is the only way we can achieve accord on any scriptural matter. For once, we can agree to agree. Nevertheless, we will only achieve this desired harmony if we are all being led by the Spirit. And seeing as we are not, we have encountered a major inflection concerning these matters. Consider this and be advised. Those who are not being led by the Spirit of Elohim will never see the truth you see, for they are either acquiring spiritual blindness or they are already spiritually blind. You will know because they will argue baseless points by isolating scriptures they have twisted to fit their delusional paradigm. Like fools, they will wrestle with the word of truth in an asinine attempt to make the scripture say what they want them to say. Therefore, you have two choices. You can cast your pearls before swine by wasting your time arguing points they will never concede, or you can move on and shake the dust off your feet. My advice to you is simple. Choose wisely. It will be according to your faith. Now, there is no denying that these are grave matters. And even though all spiritual matters have life or death consequences, you should consider the consequences that will befall those who believe great tribulation is determined upon the renewed nation of Israel in these last days. Those who are expecting great tribulation will receive great tribulation, for this is an offshoot of the spiritual laws of cause and effect, and a matter which is confirmed by the scriptures. Isaiah 29:20 reads, "For the ruthless one is brought to naught, the scorner is consumed, and all who watch for evil shall be cut off." Now, if you read the entire passage, you will see this is an end times prophecy. And Isaiah makes it very clear that all who watch for evil will be cut off. In other words, if you are looking for great tribulation in these last days, you will have the great tribulation you are looking for. Here again, this is the spiritual law of cause and effect, which we have analyzed in prior podcasts. Vis-a-vis, whatever you are expecting to happen in your life will ultimately happen. Here is why. Your thought dimension is designed to subconsciously align your physical and spiritual output to generate your expected reality. Now, the scriptural line for this example is, according to your faith, be it so. That is to say, as it pertains to all matters of faith, whatever you believe will happen, will happen. And this is the word of Yahushua Messiah. Matthew 9:28-29 reads, "And when he came into the house, the blind men came to him. And Yahushua said to them, 'Do you believe that I am able to do this?' They said to him, 'Yes, Master.' Then he touched their eyes, saying, 'According to your faith, let it be to you.'" Now, within this discourse lies the solution and the problem. The solution is simply have faith. For look, listen, it has been written, without faith, it is impossible to please him. Here is why. When you refuse to have faith in Yahuwah, you are questioning his ability to do whatever he said he would do according to the election and the promise. In effect, every time you doubt the word of Elohim, you are indicting the Most High Yahuwah, accusing him of being a liar and incompetent. And this, my friends, is the problem. And yet, it's not a new problem isolated to one's interpretation of the timing of the Great Tribulation. Quite the contrary, it's a recurring problem we have witnessed since the beginning of the restoration of the nation. If you follow this podcast, then you already know where I'm going with this. That's right. I'm taking it back to the Shabbat. I'm calling out all those who consistently profane the Shabbat. Here is why. Despite the wide range of excuses these lawbreakers will give you for working on the Shabbat, here is what it all comes down to. Everyone who consistently profanes the Shabbat by disobeying the Most High Yahuwah Elohim, by working on this set-apart day, ultimately does so because they do not believe Yahuwah will provide for them if they walk in obedient faith and guard his command. In this regard, these rebels and everyone who transgresses any of the commands of Elohim do so because they don't believe in him. It doesn't matter what they say. At the end of the day, actions speak louder than words. My grandfather used to say, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. Yahuwah is the same way. He doesn't care about the profane lip service of transgressors. He is alone interested in the degrees of your faith and how willing you are to trust him. Yahushua is the same way. And thus it is written, when the Son of Adam comes, shall he find faith in the earth. Brothers and sisters, let us hear the conclusion of these matters. Whatever shall befall you in your life will not be determined by time or chance or any other circumstance. Not so, my friends. Whatever shall befall you in your life, it will be according to your faith. The gods they have created. Now, the sum of these matters is sure, and this summation constitutes a critical inflection point that we can follow as we conclude this podcast and this mini-series on the Great Tribulation. Consider this. When men and women of faith openly doubt the Most High Yahuwah Elohim, and yet continue to promote some type of belief system and their trust in some God, it is not in service to Elohim. Rather, it is in service to the gods they have created. This may not be a matter the Spirit has revealed to you, but he has revealed it to me. And now I am revealing it to you in the spirit of the watchman. To wit, those who claim to serve Yahuwah Elohim and yet do not have complete faith in him. They have made for themselves another God. For example, to all who profane the Shabbat, you don't serve Elohim because you don't believe in him. Quite the contrary, you believe in lawlessness, and you have created some other God who apparently doesn't care if you break the Shabbat. You've created some pathetic false God whose laws and commands are apparently negotiable. What fools! Any God whose commands can be negotiated is clearly unqualified to execute the final judgment. For lo, if you can negotiate your obedience to a God's commands here and now, surely you can negotiate whatever sentence is handed down to you at the judgment. No, think about it. Let's talk about those who run to the doctor or the medicine cabinet whenever they're not feeling well, as opposed to turning first to Yahuwah Elohim and effectual fasting and prayer. They serve a God who apparently does not possess the power to heal. Quite the contrary, this sick God apparently desires for his followers to become ill and then cast their monies into the pharmaceutical industry, an industry which is statutory witchcraft and legislated drug sorcery. I know what I'm talking about. It's all in the book. Brothers and sisters, I could go on, but what's the use? The stroke is now clear. Everyone who indicts the Most High Yahuwah Elohim in the spirit of doubt is not only a worker of iniquity, they are creators of false gods. And this should come as no surprise. As I have said consistently, in line with the scriptures, the thing that was shall be again, and there is no new thing under the sun. To wit, the same way the former nation of Israel created false gods back then, the false brothers and sisters in our midst are creating false gods today. True, the false gods of today are not typically wood and stone. Quite the contrary, they are men and women who don't mind being idolized. They are drugs, TV, electronics, anything or anyone you trust more than Elohim or spend more time engaging than his spirit. Be that as it may, it doesn't matter what temporary pleasure or relief these false gods may provide you, for they can do nothing for you on Judgment Day. There you will lament with your final breath, for the gods you have created will sink your soul into endless death. Now, here is the final word. But there were those who came to cleave, to argue not, but to believe. Alas, the cries went out to grieve, the tainted webs that others weave. Brothers and sisters, I trust that you can see how this matter is bigger than coming to understand the timing of the Great Tribulation. Yes, that was the focus of this mini-series and the primary objective. And yet, the more critical matter is operating with the spirit of wisdom, which is a characteristic of all the children of the Most High Elohim. As you very well know by now, the sealing of these set-apart ones is coming to an end. The day of salvation is coming to an end. So, whatever you do, whatever you believe, do it quickly, for the sealing of the set-apart ones is almost over, and very soon, Yahuwah will be sifting. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on all the lessons you have heard this week and ask the Father to give you clarity on anything you are struggling to receive. And if you are led, please feel free to reach out to me. You can fill out a form on our website and let us know what questions you have. And remember, the only question that can truly hurt you is the one you fail to ask. Last but not least, enjoy the upcoming Shabbat and the weekend, and be ready to get back at it next week as we continue to make our calling and election sure in pursuit of the precious and priceless seal of Elohim. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 293. The Truth About the Great Tribulation, Part 3. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 294. The Purpose of the Sealing of the Set Apart Ones, Part 1. I will post this podcast on Monday, June 24th, 2024. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch. Continue to pray. Continue in fasting. And most of all, continue to be focused. For the end is coming. The end is near.